There are secrets so ancient, so deeply woven into the fabric of human history, that entire civilizations have risen and fallen without ever uncovering them. Secrets buried beneath layers of doctrine, rewritten scripture, and the silent corridors of time. But what if one of these secrets was once part of Christianity itself, before it was erased, outlawed, and declared forbidden? Imagine a knowledge so profound that it challenged the very structure of spiritual authority. A teaching whispered in the temples of Egypt, sung in the hymns of ancient India, and contemplated by Greek philosophers long before the birth of Christ. A teaching that spoke not only about life, but about lives, about the soul's long journey across centuries and bodies. Reincarnation, a word absent from modern Christian doctrine, yet perhaps once present, perhaps once embraced, perhaps once written on the pages of Scripture, before being removed. To understand how this could be possible, we must first step into the shadows of the past, to the sacred worlds that existed thousands of years before Christianity took form. Beneath the sands of ancient Egypt, where colossal pyramids stand like eternal guardians of forgotten truths, priests believed the soul did not simply die. It journeyed. It traveled through realms of light and darkness, facing judgment, transformation, and rebirth. In the Book of the Dead, the soul is not a prisoner of a single lifetime, but a traveler returning again and again until it reaches balance. And far beyond the desert winds, on the banks of the Ganges River, another vision of existence flourished. The Vedic sages of India spoke of Samsarod, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Every action, every intention, every choice created ripples across lifetimes. Karma was not punishment, but education. The soul evolves, learns, suffers, and awakens until it reaches moksha, the final liberation. Even the Greeks, whose philosophy shaped Western civilization, embraced reincarnation. Pythagoras, one of history's greatest minds, taught that the soul is eternal, passing through body after body as it purifies itself. Plato wrote that Socrates believed in the soul as ascent through multiple lives, each incarnation a step closer to divine wisdom. Across Egypt, India, and Greece, one truth echoed: the soul is ancient, the soul returns, the soul evolves. So, if so many civilizations understood reincarnation as a fundamental law of existence, how did Christianity become the one major tradition to deny it? Or did it? Because, as we will see, in the early centuries of Christian history, the story was very different. Before the rise of rigid doctrine, before church councils defined what was allowed and what was heresy, early followers of Christ had a far more expansive vision of the soul. They believed in a spiritual journey that stretched far beyond a single lifetime. A journey through realms, through ages, through countless experiences, all guided by divine purpose. And at the center of this worldview stood one manner thinker, a mystic, a theologian whose influence shaped the foundations of Christian philosophy, a figure later condemned, silenced, and erased. Origen of Alexandria, a man who believed that the soul had lived before, a man who taught that we return again and again until we reach spiritual perfection. But why were his ideas and the very concept of reincarnation eventually outlawed? To understand that we must travel deeper into history, into power struggles, political agendas, and a monumental decision that would forever change the shape of Christian belief. A decision that would take place in Constantinople 5 centuries after Christ. But before we reach that turning point, we must first understand the ancient spiritual world that shaped the earliest Christians. A world full of forgotten teachings, mystical traditions, and truths that still whisper beneath the surface of our history. The journey begins now. Thanks for watching. And if you want to uncover more of these hidden truths, be sure to subscribe. To understand why reincarnation disappeared from Christian teaching, we must first understand the man whose ideas once carried it into the heart of early Christianity. A man both celebrated and condemned. A visionary whose brilliance shaped centuries of theology, yet whose name would later be erased from official doctrine. His name was Origen of Alexandria, born in the 3rd century. In a world caught between ancient pagan wisdom and the rising message of Christ, Origen stood at the crossroads of spiritual traditions. He was not simply a theologian, he was a mystic, a philosopher, a seeker of universal truth. His mind moved freely through the spiritual ideas of Egypt, Greece, and Judea, searching for a unifying pattern behind existence. And for Origen, one truth stood out clearly. The soul is eternal. The soul existed before this life, and the soul will exist after it, transforming, learning, evolving. In his monumental work on first principles, Origen envisioned a universe alive with divine purpose. Souls, he taught, were not created at birth. They existed long before, in a realm of pure spirit, where they freely chose their relationship with God. But through choices, actions, and spiritual needs, souls descended into the physical world to continue their evolution. Origen believed that each soul's life on Earth was a step 1 chapter in a vast cosmic story. When the body died, the soul would return, not as punishment, but as opportunity. Rebirth was God's way of guiding the soul toward ultimate purification. As Origen wrote, every soul enters this world strengthened by the victories and weakened by the defeats of its former lives. To Origen, this wasn't heresy. It was logic, it was justice, it was compassion. For how could a single lifetime filled with inequality, suffering, and circumstances beyond one's control fully determine the eternal destiny of a soul? How could a child born into hardship be judged the same as a king born into privilege? Reincarnation, Origen believed, was the great equalizer, a divine system of growth where every soul eventually reaches perfection. And early Christians listened. In those first centuries, Christianity was not yet a rigid institution. It was a movement, a living, breathing exploration of the divine. Many early believers accepted the idea that the soul traveled through multiple lives. Some saw it as essential to understanding justice, compassion, and spiritual evolution. But history has a way of shifting around power. And as Christianity grew, spreading across the Roman Empire, its teachings became more regulated, more controlled, more political. By the 5th century, the spiritual freedom of the early church began to tighten. Powerful leaders sought a unified doctrine, one belief system to hold the vast empire together. A single lifetime, a single judgment, a single path to salvation. These ideas reinforced the authority of the church. Reincarnation did not, because if a soul could evolve across lifetimes, guided by its own choices and God's universal law, then the church was no longer the sole gatekeeper of salvation. A soul with countless chances does not fear eternal damnation. A soul that evolves naturally does not require strict institutional control. A soul with its own spiritual journey cannot be governed by a single empire. And so, Origen's teachings, once celebrated solely, became dangerous. His ideas challenged the growing political power of the church. They questioned the authority of emperors. They offered freedom to profound, to expansive, to uncontrollable for the institutions forming around Christianity. By the time the Byzantine Empire rose to power, forces were already moving to silence him. What began as suspicion became criticism. What began as criticism became condemnation. Until finally, the church made a decision that would echo across history, a decision not of spirituality, but of politics. A decision that would be made in Constantinople, under an emperor determined to unify doctrine at any cost. But before we explore that moment, we must understand the world that gave rise to such power. A world where faith, empire, and fear intertwined, and where one council held in the year 553 would forever reshape Christianity. The turning point is coming. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next chapter. By the 6th century, Christianity had become far more than a faith. It was the backbone of an empire, a structure of power, authority, and obedience. And at the center of that structure stood the Byzantine throne, Emperor Justinian, a ruler as ambitious as he was relentless. His dream was to unify the empire politically, culturally, spiritually. But unification required control. Control over teachings, beliefs, interpretations, and most of all, control over the fate of the human soul. Reincarnation did not serve that dream. If people believed they had many lifetimes, the church could not hold absolute authority over salvation. If souls evolved naturally, then fear of eternal damnation lost its power. If spiritual growth was personal and cyclical, then religious institutions could not dictate humanity's fate. And so, a plan was formed, not through spiritual revelation, but through politics. Behind the marble walls of Constantinople, Justinian and his powerful wife, Theodora, began to reshape Christian doctrine. Theodora, haunted by her harsh early life as a performer and courtesan, feared the idea of returning to hardship in another incarnation. Justinian feared the fragmentation of the empire. Their motivations fused into a single goal: eliminate the doctrine of reincarnation forever. To accomplish this, Justinian called for an extraordinary gathering, a council that would decide the future of Christian theology. It became known as the Second Council of Constantinople, 553 AD, but the council was not what it appeared to be. Bishops were summoned under the weight of imperial pressure. Discussions took place behind closed doors, overshadowed by political presence. And in a stunning maneuver, Justinian issued a set of anathemas, official condemnations against the teachings of Origen. Among them, a direct strike, the rejection of the soul's pre-existence, and by implication, the rejection of reincarnation. Some bishops resisted, some feared the implications. Some questioned whether an emperor had the authority to rewrite theology. But resistance was dangerous and short-lived. Those who opposed faced threats of exile, loss of position, or worse. Many signed the decrees simply to avoid imperial wrath. Others convinced themselves that obedience was holiness. And some, weary of conflict, surrendered to the tide of power. By the end of the council, the decision was made. Reincarnation, once discussed, once accepted by many early Christians, once woven into Origen's vision of divine justice, was declared heresy. Not by Christ, not by Scripture, but by imperial commands. Origen himself, long dead, was branded a heretic centuries after his life. His works were burned, suppressed, or rewritten. His ideas were silenced, his legacy buried beneath layers of doctrine. And the Church emerged with a new, absolute teaching: one life, one judgment, no return. A doctrine that placed salvation entirely in the hands of the Church doctrine, that reshaped Christianity for centuries to come. But even as the official teachings hardened, fragments of the old truth remained hidden in Scripture, in the whispers of mystics, and in the memories of souls who felt something deeper than a single lifetime. Because truth, real truth, never fully disappears. It waits, it sleeps, it lingers in the shadows of history, waiting to be rediscovered. And so, in the final chapter of this journey, we will explore the biblical passages many believe still hint at reincarnation, and the modern evidence that suggests the soul's journey may indeed stretch far beyond one lifetime. The mystery is not over. In fact, it may only be beginning. Even after the Council of Constantinople buried the doctrine of reincarnation under imperial decree, the idea never truly died. Truth has a way of surviving. It lingers like embers beneath ash, waiting for the right moment to ignite again. For centuries, the Church taught a single life, a single judgment, a single destiny. Yet hidden within Scripture, quiet, subtle, but undeniable, were passages that seemed to whisper an older understanding, a deeper story. A story echoing the ancient belief that the soul returns again and again. Take, for example, the mysterious exchange recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. After the Transfiguration, the disciples ask Jesus about the prophecy that Elijah must return before the Messiah. Jesus answers, "Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him." He is referring to John the Baptist, to early Christians, to Jewish mystics, To anyone familiar with ancient traditions, this statement would have been unmistakable. The prophetic spirit of Elijah lived again in John, a continuity of the soul across lifetimes. Then there is the haunting moment in the Gospel of John, when Jesus' disciples encounter a man blind from birth and ask, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? How could a man sin before birth, unless he lived before?" Jesus does not rebuke the idea of a pre-existent soul. He simply explains that the blindness serves a divine purpose. The question itself reveals that reincarnation was a familiar concept to those around him. And again, in the conversation with Nicodemus, Jesus speaks of being born again, not merely in metaphor, but as part of a profound spiritual process, a rebirth of the soul, a cycle of transformation. These fragments, scattered throughout the New Testament, raise a striking possibility. Perhaps reincarnation was never foreign to early Christianity, but was woven into its earliest interpretations, before politics reshaped doctrine. Yet Christianity is not the only source hinting at a deeper truth. For centuries, stories have emerged from around the world, children recalling details of lives long past, memories of places they've never visited, names they've never heard. And while skeptics dismiss them, scientists and researchers have begun to take notice. One of the most famous investigators was Dr. Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia. His work spanned decades, studying over 2,000 cases of children who described previous lives with astonishing accuracy. Many remembered names, villages, families, causes of death details that later proved historically correct. These children had no access to such knowledge, no way of inventing such stories. Was it imagination, memory, or something far more ancient, something the early Christians might have considered obvious? In the modern world, spiritual seekers and psychologists have turned to past life regression therapy, uncovering emotional wounds, fears, and blocks that cannot be traced to any event in this lifetime. Yet when explored through the lens of previous incarnations, these mysteries suddenly make sense. Traumas carried across centuries, lessons repeated across ages, a soul seeking harmony through experience after experience. Reincarnation offers a lens through which suffering becomes meaningful, where growth becomes eternal, where every life is a chapter in a larger cosmic journey. Banned in a world obsessed with immediacy, with instant success and instant salvation, the idea of multiple lifetimes returns with a quiet, compassionate message. You are not limited by your past. You are not defined by your failures. You have been here before. You will be here again. And every life is a chance to rise higher. For some, this idea awakens a deep inner recognition, memory beyond memory, a feeling that their soul is older than their years, shaped by experiences they cannot logically explain. For others, reincarnation remains a mystery, a possibility, a question that stretches into eternity. But whether one accepts or rejects it, the deeper message is universal. The soul is on a journey, a vast, beautiful, ancient journey. And perhaps the true purpose of life is not to reach salvation in a single lifetime, but to grow in love, wisdom, compassion, and understanding across many. In the end, reincarnation is not about escaping. Life is about embracing it again and again until we become the best version of ourselves. Because whether we live once or countless times, the heart of every teaching Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Greek, Egyptian is the same. Live with purpose, live with compassion, live with love. For these are the qualities that shape the soul in this life and in all lives to come. Thank you for watching, and may your journey, whatever its beginning, whatever its end, be filled with light.